Excuse me, sir. That's my chair. I'm going to ask that you leave. Thank you. Hello friendos, this is Chain, welcoming you back to Chain of Commander, your current leading source for special effects on YouTube. For today's episode, I think we're going to take a look at some of the underappreciated cards in Magic, specifically looking at some of the coolest and what I personally believe are some of the underappreciated mono-colored removal spells in Magic, specifically for EDH. Now, before we get into this, I do need to put a little disclaimer here. This is entirely opinion. Super objective opinion. I'm right, you're wrong. No, that's not true. So if you don't agree with anything I say, definitely sound off in the comments below. I'd love to hear what your opinions on these cards are and what cards you would consider underappreciated removal spells. So, you know, while you're down there, there's that subscribe button. Hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you folks join us going forward. And you know, if you like it, hit the like button to show it. And lastly, if any of these cards spark your interest in deck building, despite them being mere cents, I still recommend ordering them using our TCG Player affiliate link below. It won't cost you a single cent more, but it will help out the channel. Now, with all that said, let's get into this list here. We're just going to go straight Wooburger order. We're not going to do anything fancy like a top 10, top 5, or anything like that. So let's start out with white. Now, white is one of the best colors for spot removal in Magic. Your Path to Exile, your Swords to Plowshares, your Oblivion Rings, stuff like that, that are just super efficient cost-wise answers to anything on the board. But there is one particular card that I think many of you are overlooking. Now, people who are regulars of this channel may recall back in my Snowlands episode I talked about this card, but you know what? I like it so much, I'm going to talk about it again. And that is On Thin Ice. On Thin Ice is a single white enchantment that needs to be enchanted to a target snow land, but when it enters the battlefield, exile target creature for as long as On Thin Ice remains on the battlefield. So, single white, exile effect, right up there with Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares. Now, Snowlands used to be tough to get a hold of, which would have made this particular card maybe a bit more bothersome to try to include in your deck, but because of the set it came out of, Modern Horizons including a Snowland in every pack, Snowlands are now significantly more accessible. So if you just build your decks with all your basics being snow basics, this is an easy slot in to be a single mana, super efficient form of removal. So, big plus on that one. I personally play it in my Enchantress deck because not only is it great removal, it also triggers my Enchantresses, and I just absolutely adore this card. Truly a pet card of mine. And while we're on the topics of pet cards, let's go on to the next card. For blue, I am looking at Boomerang. Now, blue on the whole actually has a lot of very cost-effective ways to handle creatures. It has Pongify and Rapid Hybridization and Reality Shift. Great ways to handle specifically creatures, but sometimes it's not a creature that a blue deck is having issues with. They might be looking across the way from a Narset or Teferi, something that is a non-creature that is preventing them from getting their game plan. And there is still amazing effective answers in that as well, super budget ones too, and that is Boomerang. I love Boomerang so much. It's a bit more nuanced than, say, the blue creature removal, because it's a little bit more than just destroying a creature in exchange for a 3/3, because it's a tempo card. It doesn't get rid of anything, it just puts it into the hand for the time being. So there's a little bit more nuance around when to play it, how to play it, and how to use it to handle the board, but sometimes that's all you really need, is that little bit more time to get your game plan going, and Boomerang is a great way to handle that. It also can hit lands, which very, very few things in blue recently have been able to do. So if there's a problematic land out there, or if somebody's making a man land or something and attacking you with it, you can use Boomerang to just boop it on back to their hand. Love Boomerang. A lot of flavor in the fact that it's just returning it back to their hand, just like a Boomerang do. Sapa, Boomerang, and always know you come back to me. I'll stick the GIF right there if I can find one. Yeah. Then we move on. We move on to black. Next one in Wooburger Wooburg order. And, you know, it's just more pet cards here. More pet cards, because here it's pretty well established that 1 mana removal is a prime price to pay to remove anything. In white, you have your Path to Exiles and whatnot, and stuff like that. In blue, you got your Pongifies and stuff like that. And black, it has 1 mana removal, don't get me wrong, but they're very conditional. You have things like Fatal Push, which can only hit tiny creatures or maybe mid-sized creatures if you turn on Revolt. And then you got Tragic Slip, which can only get super tiny creatures, or it can get pretty much anything if you get Morbid, but it does require it to be the Morbid there to really get its full effect. But what if I could tell you that there is a non-conditional black removal spell that you can be casting here for only 1 mana, and that spell is Murderous Cut. This thing, sure, it says 5 CMC, it says 4 and a black, but it has the wonderful ability of Delve, where you can exile cards from your graveyard to pay for the generic mana cost of the effect, and you're in a black deck. You're probably going to have a fully loaded graveyard very quickly in the game, to the point where Murderous Cut is essentially 1 black to destroy any creature you want. And that is an amazing rate, and I'm surprised that I don't see this card out there in more decks, especially graveyard decks, where it's essentially a free spin. Murderous Cut, I will talk that card up, and black is one of my favorite removal spells out there. So black's out of the way. Let's get to red. Red's a bit of a tougher one, because red, unlike the previous 3, red, all of its removal is very dependent on factors outside of your control. Because red does its removal in the form of damage, the damage being done by the spell has to be enough to destroy or cover the toughness of the creature you are targeting. So that's why I really like Flame Slash, of all things. A single red to do 4 damage to a target creature. People like their Lightning Bolt, which is great because it can hit players, planeswalkers, and all that sort of stuff. But Flame Slash does that extra damage to handle more creatures. There are roughly a little bit over 11,000 creatures available in EDH, and Flame Slash can actually handle over 8,000 of those 11,000 creatures. So that's roughly, we're looking at between 70 and 73% of all creatures in EDH can be taken down with a single red mana on the board. And in red, where removal, mono red, where removal is a little bit more of a premium, this is not a bad rate to help manage the board. And I would definitely kind of talk this one up here as a potential inclusion in any mono red decks you might be brewing going forward. And that, I think, Wooburgetally, it's like alphabetically, but in Wooburg order, brings us to green. And green, very, very similar to red. It relies on dependencies outside of our control. In this case, green is actually more of a needy removal style effect, because most of its individual spot removal effects for creatures are based on fighting. And that means you need to have a big, beefy boofer on your side of the table in order to take care of your opponent's not as big, beefy boofer on the other side of the table. And fighting is a symmetrical effect. It does damage both ways, which means there's a decent chance your own creature might bite the dust on it. And that is why, when it comes to biting, we want to make sure those bites are rabid and hit them with the rabid bite. Because unlike other fight spells, this one is asymmetrical. It only does the damage to your opponent's creatures. And in mono green, where the removal is a premium, there's a very solid chance you're going to have a decent-sized green creature on your side of the battlefield. So the rabid bite portion of this, the fact that you need a creature out there probably won't be too bad. And since this is only doing damage in the one direction, your creature should be completely safe in this process. So definitely something, as far as all 5 of these cards go, super excellent budget choices for removal. I know all the good removal is starting to get up there in price, where some of them are approaching over $1, $2, $3 for good cards and good removal spells. All of these cards I've mentioned so far are under $1. They are mere cents to the dollar. So if you are building with a budget-conscious mind, these are all excellent choices as possibilities in your deck. Now, before I go, I have one more for you, actually. Because I was focusing on monocolor decks, but I did not focus on zero-color decks. And there is, let's call it an honorable mention because it's a bit of a left winger here, right out of the right side of the field, outside in the end zones. I don't know sport ball. For our colorless decks, I would actually recommend Scour from Existence. This is a 7 mana exile anything spell. Now, because it's colorless, it has access to every deck, which means it needs that higher cost to become something that's not just slotted in to every possible deck it can fit in. And in colorless decks, they're very often going to be fighting for mana-efficient effects that are normally found at lower CMCs in colors because of that lack of color requirement. Also, colorless decks very like to focus on mana rocks and playing things like the Tron lands, which lets them net a whole bunch of mana in a very tight amount of permanence. So 7 mana in a colorless deck might not be a full 7 mana cost. You might only be tapping 2 to 3 lands to pay that, along with a couple mana rocks to exile anything on the field. And completely unconditional removal like that. I like compare it to something like Meteor Golem. This is another 7 mana colorless removal spell that can destroy any non-land permanent and give you a 2/2 body. You don't get the 2/2 body with Scour from Existence, but you do get exiling, which is a very useful tool against a lot of decks out there, which has recursion. Also lets you get lands, and similar to Boomerang, that's a big plus because sometimes the issue isn't necessarily a non-land permanent, it is specifically a land permanent out there. So all these cards, six what I consider perfectly fine pieces of removal that I don't see anywhere out there. And doing research for these, none of these cards got played in 2% or more of the decks that they were eligible for. So if you are building on a budget, if you are very budget conscious in your deck construction and you're trying to do as much with as little cash as you have, these 6 cards are definitely something you should be kind of keeping your mind on just in case they will fit your builds. All that said, I thank you folks for joining me today. I love having you folks join me whenever I do a video. I love the comments below, so definitely comment below with what you love. What are your favorite removal spells? Especially bonus points if they are excellent budget options. Because we can all go out there and spend $4 on a Path to Exile or $10. It's down to $13 now, Cyclonic Rift, which is not a bad price. Pick them up if you can. But sometimes we just don't have that amount to swing. So let me know some excellent budget choices for removal that you folks like. And I'm waiting to hear from you. Till then, thank you all for joining me today. I hope you guys have a good week.